here.
Forget the rockets. Huntsville's shadows are deeper than space. Beneath the scientific shine of Rocket City, old southern darkness festers. From the restless spirits of Maple Hill Cemetery to the unseen eyes watching the antebellum streets, history here doesn't sleep. The veil is thin. We count down the top 15 haunted places in Huntsville, Alabama. You won't look at the stars the same way again. 1. Maple Hill Cemetery, Huntsville. Maple Hill Cemetery in Huntsville, officially established in 1822, is the largest and oldest municipal burying ground in Alabama. Its 78 acres house over 80. 0 is interments, a density that creates persistent thermal anomalies and unexplained acoustic phenomena after midnight. The sheer volume of unrest buried here, particularly within the massive Confederate burial section, serves as a nexus for residual emotional energy. These concentrations often manifest as faint, sorrowful cries carried on. The wind sounds too specific to be dismissed as mere highway traffic, yet too fragile to be definitively recorded by standard equipment. The most enduring and geographically localized legend involves an isolated section often referred to as the Gates of Hell. This specific boundary, positioned near the ancient receiving vault and the oldest Victorian mausoleums, is distinguished by an intense, localized cold. Even during high summer temperatures, individuals who cross this threshold report immediate disorientation and extreme nausea. Local documentation confirms that if one leaves an offering on the specific marble bench within the perimeter, the item will be gone by dawn, occasionally replaced by disturbed earth or strange, dark stones. The Huntsville Paranormal Research Society records this location as having the highest concentration of EVPs, dominated by low, guttural moans and phrases in archaic English. A pervasive residual haunting supplements the localized legends. The most documented specific sighting involves a translucent figure, a lady in white, who drifts between the Confederate monument and the O'Shaughnessy family crypt. During early morning hours, witnesses consistently describe her wearing antebellum mourning attire, her face obscured by an unnatural visual distortion, like water running over glass. Her appearance is consistently linked to localized equipment failure and overwhelming emotional despair for anyone attempting extended direct observation, suggesting a deliberate rejection of modern scrutiny. 2. Low Mill Arts and Entertainment, Huntsville. The vast brick structure of Low Mill, established in 1900 as a textile factory, operated until the 1970s. For nearly 8 decades, the interior was a place of extreme noise, poor air quality, and documented industrial hazards. Historical records confirm multiple severe accidents, typical of the unregulated era. The sheer scale of the building amplifies a palpable sense of residual trauma, the exhaustive labor of thousands of mill hands absorbed into the aging concrete and massive supporting beams. Artists and patrons frequently report documented phenomena, particularly localized near the 3rd floor and the main loading docks. The most disturbing claims involve phantom sound activation, the undeniable roar of textile looms and high-speed machinery operating in vacant studios, ceasing instantly when approached. Professional investigations have registered severe, localized drops in temperature alongside the unmistakable odor of singed cotton. Eyewitness accounts detail fleeting, dust-caked apparitions silent, gray figures moving with the rapid, focused pace of employees eternally bound to the defunct factory schedule. The most persistent entity is the documented specter of a small child, frequently sighted near the north stairwells. Local histories link this haunting to a documented industrial fire in the 1940s. Though specific casualty records remain ambiguous, studio residents log unexplained movement of secured equipment and persistent reports of muffled, childish whispering emanating from the original elevator shafts. Even now, decades after the factory's closure, the building's heavy silence is often interrupted by the residual noise of industrial trauma, suggesting the schedule of the old low manufacturing company never truly ended. 3. Burritt on the Mountain, Huntsville. The stone manor of Burritt on the Mountain, completed in 1938, stands as a testament to its creator, Dr. William Henry Burritt, a wealthy and deeply eccentric physician who obsessed over its construction until his death in 1955. The architectural singularity, often described as part castle, part flying saucer, provides a unique echo chamber for documented residual phenomena. Museum staff and security personnel consistently log incidents that defy typical explanation, primarily centered within the main residence and the historic cabins relocated to the property. Accounts detail the persistent sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps moving across the second-floor observation deck. Long after the facility closes, these sounds, witnesses claim, carry a methodical, urgent rhythm, always circling the unusual, circular hallways. Temperature anomalies are frequent, documented by maintenance reports noting sudden, dramatic drops in specific corridors, often preceding the sound of furniture scraping or the inexplicable locking of interior doors, utilizing original 1930s mechanisms. The prevailing activity is connected to the doctor himself, still overseeing his domain. The most disturbing reports involve the doctor's former study, where visitors have reported a cold, intense pressure on their chest, a sensation interpreted as being medically examined or restrained. One documented incident involved a volunteer finding a collection of antique surgical tools, previously locked away, arranged neatly on the main library table. The tools were stained with a dried, reddish-brown fluid, supporting the enduring legend of Dr. Burritt's morbid, persistent post-mortem observation of the living. 4. Harrison Brothers Hardware, Huntsville. The Harrison Brothers Hardware Store, established in 1897 at 124 Southside Square in Huntsville, has maintained a temporal stasis rarely seen outside of deliberate preservation. This environment, rich with the smell of linseed oil and aging wood, is not merely preserved but actively overseen by the ghost of Robert E. Harrison, who passed away in 1974. Robert, known for his fastidious nature and lifelong residency in the apartment directly above the shop, has never entirely vacated the premises. Staff members, volunteers for the historic Huntsville Foundation, consistently report activity, consistent with minute management oversight. The persistent clicking of the second-floor door latch, the faint scraping sound of a key being tested in the main lock long after closing, and a distinct, rapid temperature drop near the front counter on clear nights. The most common manifestations involve the inventory itself. Objects, meticulously arranged by day on the shelves or in the back storeroom, are often found slightly shifted or clustered in unnatural groupings the following morning. Particularly among the cleaning supplies, a deliberate disruption noted for decades, witnesses frequently detect the strong, fleeting aroma of pipe tobacco near the tall, caged elevator shaft, a detail historically corroborated by Robert's personal habit. Furthermore, the old National Cash Register, a massive mechanical fixture of the front desk, has been known to emit the unmistakable, sharp cha-ching of the drawer springing open when the room is empty and devoid of any physical vibration. This phenomenon suggests not random chaotic energy, but a habituated, cyclical action tied specifically to the daily operations Robert maintained for nearly 80 years. The spectral presence is possessive, though never aggressive. The pervasive feeling reported by those working alone is one of careful scrutiny, the distinct sensation of an invisible foreman checking ledgers or evaluating product placement. This eternal diligence reinforces the local legend. Robert E. Harrison did not transition to the afterlife. He merely changed his job description. He remains the vigilant caretaker of the store, ensuring that no dust settles incorrectly and that the history of Harrison Brothers hardware remains exactly as he left it. An eternal proprietor monitoring his property from the shadows between the nail kegs and the paint cans. Huntsville Depot Museum, Huntsville. The structure of the Huntsville Depot, dating from 1860, is calcified trauma. Following Union occupation in 1862, this hub was repurposed into a brutal holding facility for Confederate prisoners and a makeshift hospital. The brickwork witnessed not only troop movements, but the agonizing decline of hundreds. The suffering was systematic: disease, starvation, and crude surgical procedures without sanitation. Documentation suggests the dying were often left where they fell, their presence a suffocating pall over the site. Visitors consistently report acute despair near the loading docks, where the dead were allegedly stacked prior to mass burial. The most frequently observed entity is the woman in white, perceived as a residual image floating silently near the upper gallery, perhaps searching for a lost son or attending to unhealed wounds. Researchers have correlated specific acute cold spots not with structural drafts, but with former amputation stations, the chilling sensation often accompanied by a faint, metallic odor reminiscent of stale blood. These localized atmospheric drops are startlingly persistent, sometimes plunging the temperature by 20 degrees in seconds. Irrespective of external climate control, surveillance footage has captured unexplained shadow figures moving against the light, possessing no thermal signature. The haunting manifests less as poltergeist activity and more as sustained psychological oppression. Staff have routinely abandoned shifts, citing auditory hallucinations, faint, rasping coughs emanating from sealed rooms, or the rhythmic drag of unseen boots on the wooden platforms. Sounds historically aligned with patrolling guards. The overwhelming narrative, supported by decades of evidence, is not one of benign preservation, but of active retention. The depot does not simply contain history. It operates as an archive of unprocessed agony, trapping the suffering of the Civil War within its foundation. Big Spring Park, Huntsville. Big Spring Park is the documented origin point of Huntsville, established in 1805 because of this massive artesian source. During the Civil War, the area functioned as a pressurized Confederate supply depot. The dread of that era lingers in the deep. Cold water, the park's lagoon hides the geological core, a vertical limestone shaft descending directly into the aquifer. A depth sunlight never penetrates, creating a permanent void of black, silent water at the city's core. This specific, unsettling reality anchors the documented hauntings. The most persistent local legend centers on the Bride of the Spring. In the late 1860s, a woman distraught by war loss reportedly weighted herself with stones and walked into the strongest part of the current. The powerful outward flow of the underground stream ensured her body was never recovered, lost forever to the deep limestone chambers beneath the city. Historical accounts from the era describe an unnerving auditory phenomenon near the spring's mouth following the incident, suggesting the water itself holds the trauma of the deceased. This is not the sound of a spectral sigh, but a terrifying residual noise carried on the water. The faint, rhythmic gurgling that mimics a final, desperate attempt at breathing against the immense hydrostatic pressure of the aquifer. Today, maintenance workers accessing the old water intakes report sudden, paralyzing drops in temperature and an unnerving sense of extreme compression, confirming the cold, perpetual sorrow trapped in the black depths of Big Spring. Constitution Hall Park, Huntsville. The meticulous brick paths and colonial lamp posts of Constitution Hall Park belie the raw history buried beneath the 1819 landmark. This seemingly serene green space, dedicated to the signing of Alabama's foundational charter, is less a monument to peace and more a historical capacitor of early state anxiety. The original Constitutional Hall stood near the earliest centers of governance and justice in Huntsville, a crucible where political destiny was forged amidst relentless discord and the dark shadow of the adjacent detention facilities. Visitors often speak of a profound, unnatural heaviness, particularly near the reconstructed log structures, a density that seems to press down from the air rather than rise from the ground. It is the palpable ghost of ambition corrupt, panicked, and desperately seeking order. The phenomena reported are subtle but persistent, echoes of procedural terror rather than dramatic apparitions. Witnesses recount indistinct, rapid arguments echoing from empty corners after sunset, brief bursts of sound that resemble gavel slams or the sudden, choked cry of a person being dragged away. Security logs, occasionally leaked, note unexplained malfunctions of motion detectors inside the reconstructed buildings, often triggered when no thermal signature is present. The pervasive feeling is one of intense scrutiny. To sit on a park bench here after midnight is to feel the hot breath of forgotten legislative tension, the scrutiny of those whose futures were decided or unjustly cut short. On this exact spot, this land, like much of old Huntsville, was built over disturbed earth, forgotten graves, and the foundations of forgotten legal severity. The haunting of Constitution Hall Park is not the tragic specter of an individual, but the collective, nervous energy of 1819 Alabama estate born in volatile uncertainty. The brick walkways merely cap a persistent, emotional reservoir of distress, a quiet history of injustice and turmoil that refuses to be completely paved over. The historical designation protects the physical structure, but nothing protects the living from the psychological weight of the foundation. Maple Hill Park, Huntsville. Maple Hill Cemetery, established 1822 in Huntsville, serves as Alabama's largest and oldest burial ground, housing generations from early pioneers to Confederate casualties. Its official history, however, is frequently obscured by localized, unsettling claims regarding phenomena in its deep historical sectors. The property, officially designated a park and protected historical site, covers significant acreage, but the focus of documented paranormal activity is highly specific, usually concerning the older, densely packed areas reserved for the burials of minors. The primary paranormal fixture is the legend of the dead children's playground. Though the original equipment placement is often debated, consistent local narratives center the activity near the pre-Civil War infant burial sections. Documentation details activity peaking after 10:00 p.m., including disembodied laughter or weeping, and the unprompted movement of swings. Multiple unrelated witnesses state these oscillations commence and sustain without measurable wind, seismic shifts, or atmospheric instability. Defying typical physical explanation, the recorded acoustic data shows speech patterns too faint to distinguish specific words, yet clearly non-natural in origin, resembling the strained cries of distressed youth. This phenomenon aligns geographically with the cemetery's highest concentration of 19th century child and infant plots, providing a disturbing historical context for the alleged residual energy. Visitors who disregard the closing hours often cite a distinct thermal and acoustic oppression settling over the area near the old stone wall. The consensus among investigators is that the grounds possess a persistent, unexplained energetic signature rooted deep within the disturbed earth. The mass grief manifesting as a tangible shift in environmental integrity at Maple Hill. Whedon House Museum, Huntsville. The Whedon House Museum in Huntsville stands as an architectural record of Alabama's early settlement, dating back to 1819. However, its historical significance is inextricably bound to the devastation of the Civil War and the subsequent Reconstruction. During the Union occupation, the house was commandeered, spared from destruction but marked by the presence of federal troops. This period of violation left scars deeper than the fading pencil graffiti still visible on the walls of the upstairs bedrooms. It left an emotional residue. Researchers documenting the structure often note an oppressive atmosphere of sustained loss that contradicts the building's cheerful yellow exterior. This sense of historical gravity is often attributed to the enduring spirit of Maria Howard Whedon, the celebrated portraitist who lived and worked within its walls, whose lifetime spanned the transition from antebellum grace to post-war desolation. Maria Whedon's lingering presence is not marked by common poltergeist activity. There are no reports of objects hurled or heavy doors slamming. Instead, her manifestation is described by museum staff and preservationists as an environmental effect, a profound, inexplicable drop in temperature centered specifically around the parlor and the second-story landing. Individuals report intense feelings of being scrutinized by an unseen presence, a deep, pervasive sorrow that threatens to overshadow immediate thought. Paranatural investigators hypothesize that the spirit is not haunting the house in the traditional sense, but is instead intrinsically tied to the act of memory itself. Maria Whedon refused to let the beauty of the past disappear, painstakingly recording the faces of the former slave community and her family. Now, her energy appears to be focused on maintaining an agonizing fidelity to that vanished world, manifesting the exact grief that overwhelmed her family following the war. The Whedon House, therefore, operates less as a museum of artifacts and more as a contained environment where the past actively resists closure. Those who spend extended periods alone in the house, particularly after sunset, describe the unsettling realization that they are not merely observing history. They are infringing upon a moment of profound, unresolved tragedy perpetually frozen in the plaster and wood. The cold that permeates the parlor is not merely an absence of heat. It is the physical sensation of encountering a sorrow so absolute it has become structural. The quiet halls preserve the memory of an Alabama that died, and the cost of that preservation is the perpetual, palpable despair of its most devoted resident. The Episcopal Church of the Nativity, Huntsville. The Episcopal Church of the Nativity, consecrated in 1859, carries the cold weight of the Union occupation of Huntsville. During the Civil War, the Gothic Revival Sanctuary was commandeered, serving alternately as a hospital, barracks, and, chillingly, the stone crypt beneath the altar became a temporary morgue for soldiers who succumbed to battle wounds and fever. This period of extreme suffering and desecration left a powerful, residual energy focused primarily in the upper levels of the structure and the sacristy, where the dead were often staged before burial. Maintenance crews and clergy routinely document unexplained occurrences centered around the organ loft, the bell tower staircase, and the high windows. The most consistent report is of heavy, methodical footsteps echoing across the empty balcony late at night, often accompanied by the distinct smell of gunpowder and old leather. Local tradition identifies the entity as the captain, a Union officer rumored to have died, not in combat, but either by accident or self-infliction, within the cramped confines of the church tower itself. While monitoring troop movements, this spectral sentry continues his duty long after the war's conclusion. Investigators note that when the phantom steps approach a doorway, the heavy oak locking mechanisms sometimes turn or unlock themselves with audible physical force. Despite the absolute lack of human interaction, this paranormal activity frequently peaks near the anniversary of the federal occupation, suggesting a temporal tether to the original trauma inflicted upon the sacred space. The building remembers its tenure as a place of profound suffering, denying peace even a century and a half later, the presence lingering in the echoing silence between the hymns. unexplained. The historic Lowry House, Huntsville. The Lowry House, built in 1830, stands as a federal relic on Adams Street in historic Huntsville. While meticulously maintained, the structure holds a permanent resonance of profound sorrow. Local accounts frequently center on a young woman, identified in some reports as Elizabeth, whose life ended abruptly within its walls during the early 19th century, sealing her presence to the premises. Her haunting is not subtle. Rather, it is characterized by palpable, measurable environmental shifts. Paranormal investigators note extreme drops in ambient temperature, centered near the grand mahogany staircase, often preceding the distinct, faint odor of old-fashioned lilies or rosewater. These thermal anomalies are consistently documented by infrared cameras and digital thermometers, indicating a non-physical displacement of heat energy. The second floor remains the undisputed epicenter of documented activity. Tenants over the decades have reported the sustained sound of soft, distinct weeping emanating specifically from the empty master bedroom, sometimes continuing for hours before abruptly fading into silence. Doors, often secured with modern deadbolts prior to the night, are frequently found mysteriously ajar by morning, and small objects placed on mantel shelves are routinely relocated overnight without apparent human intervention. These persistent, deliberate actions suggest a complex residual intelligence, rather than a mere energetic echo, implying the entity is actively interacting with the living space she never truly abandoned. The most chilling documentation remains the consistent visual sighting, a pale, gray figure caught momentarily at the upper casement window, always gazing outward towards the historic street she can no longer walk. This apparition, always female and translucent, is typically observed during the pre-dawn hours. Her vigil is constant, a silent, perpetual record of unending historical grief, captured within the rigid architecture of the Lowry House, offering a clinical study in tragedy preserved across 2 centuries. Dallas Mill Abandoned Site, Huntsville. Built in 1891, the Dallas Manufacturing Company's mill complex in Huntsville quickly became an archetype of Southern industrial might and subsequent decay. For nearly a century, the sprawling brick structure consumed the lives of local laborers, forcing them to spin cotton thread under brutal conditions, defined by stifling heat and relentless, deafening noise. The mill's closure and the catastrophic 1991 fire left a skeletal ruin, a monument to forgotten industry, where the only remaining product is a persistent, ambient dread clinging to the scorched limestone foundation. The documented trauma within the Dallas Mill walls centers heavily on its child labor pool. Historical records confirm widespread occupational illnesses and numerous ignored accidents. This tragedy now manifests as an intense auditory phenomenon. Visitors entering the remnants of the die house report the cyclical, rhythmic pounding of non-existent looms, often overlaid by thin, high-pitched shrieks, sounds too specific to be mere wind. These are interpreted as residual psychic echoes of young operatives trapped within the inferno of the textile machines. Their presence confirmed by sudden, localized temperature drops unrelated to external weather patterns, frequently recorded near the old timekeeper's office. Paranormal investigation teams have captured verifiable electronic voice phenomena (EVP) near the subterranean water pump station. The recordings consistently contain indistinct, pleading voices, measured at the frequency range of pre-adolescent children. The prevailing theory suggests these entities are bound to the site not by the moment of death, but by the overwhelming, compulsory nature of their labor. They remain in the industrial graveyard, their duty never discharged, their spectral shifts observed near the foundation, perpetually waiting for a shift change that never arrives. The silence of the abandoned mill is merely the amplification of sounds the living cannot fully ignore. Triest. Veterans Memorial Museum, Huntsville. The U.S. Veterans Memorial Museum in Huntsville documents conflicts spanning 80 years, but curatorial logs detail phenomena focused almost exclusively on the Vietnam Gallery. Night security reports repeatedly cite the distinct, documented odor of stale, unfiltered Lucky Strike cigarettes, a smell associated with the Jungle Warfare exhibit's M38 Jeep. The odor dissipates rapidly from the secured driver's seat. Despite environmental controls maintaining stable air quality throughout the museum's display halls, these events are logged as atmospheric contaminant source unidentified. The most critical incidents occur in the communications room, housing decommissioned Korean and Vietnam radio sets. Though inert, staff often observe electrical flickering and hear sharp bursts of static. On October 12, 2018, lead curator Alistair Rourke formally logged a transmission. A radio receiver briefly emitted a clear, panicked call sign Blackjack 7, taking fire. This unit was officially listed as MIA during the Ie Drang Valley conflict. Their recovered equipment is displayed mere feet from the receiver. Artifacts are preserved using archival gloves. Yet morning reports frequently note residual warmth on displayed rifle stocks and helmet interiors when dawn lights activate. These findings are not treated as folklore, but as material facts impacting preservation protocol. The institution maintains the relics of history, cataloging the residual energy and spectral evidence. In Huntsville, the documented record shows that sometimes the past refuses to be categorized. Kildare McCormick Mansion, Huntsville. The Kildare McCormick Mansion, constructed in 1878 near Huntsville, carries a dark reputation stemming from its abrupt transfer of ownership. Colonel Thomas Kildare's daughter, Evelyn, died in 1886. Although official documents cite typhus, local accounts insist her death was preceded by a severe, localized cold and unseasonal temperature depression centered on her third-floor bedroom, consistently accompanied by the sharp scent of lilies. This environmental anomaly has persisted for nearly 140 years. Modern thermographic surveys routinely record spontaneous temperature drops exceeding 15 degrees Fahrenheit in the sealed third-story corridor, regardless of exterior climate, defying conventional explanation related to HVAC systems or structural integrity. The most consistent activity involves recurring auditory and minor physical phenomena, documented by security teams and historical preservationists. After midnight, a distinct rhythmic clicking sound, characteristic of hard-soled shoes, is routinely heard traversing the upper hallway. This sound often triggers motion sensors in monitored, restricted zones where human entry is impossible. In 2008, internal glass panes in the conservatory were discovered with deep, vertical scratches consistent with fingernail marks. Surveillance footage reviewed by the Huntsville Historical Society showed no evidence of human intrusion or exterior breach. Only a brief, localized flash of light immediately before the damage was confirmed at dawn. The legend suggests Evelyn Kildare's unrest is tied to the estate's immediate acquisition by the McCormick family following her burial. Her sorrow is oppressive but non-violent. The recurring cold spots and the signature clicking pattern are logged in local police incident reports due to frequent alarms triggered by unseen internal disturbances. Visitors near the sealed third-floor doorway often report a sudden, severe pressure on the chest and an overwhelming sense of breathlessness, medically inconsistent with the structure's stable ventilation. The Kildare McCormick Mansion serves as a documented case where physical anomalies are inextricably linked to a specific historical family tragedy. 15. Montesano State Park, Huntsville. Huntsville, Montesano, or Mountain of Health, was founded on a cruel historical irony. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the crisp, high-altitude air was believed to cure consumption, drawing hundreds of tuberculosis sufferers to the heights above Huntsville. They arrived seeking salvation, but often found only isolation and a slow, wasting death far from their families. The failure rate of the mountain's cure was notoriously high, establishing the area as a persistent locus of historical trauma, concentrated near the foundations of older sanatorium structures and secluded trails used for patient exercise. Visitors report phenomena consistent with historical suffering. The temperature on specific trails often turns frigid regardless of ambient weather, a pervasive chill suggestive of the final systemic shutdown of a dying patient. Hikers occasionally report hearing the distinct, rattling sound of deep consumption, a wet, ragged coughing that quickly fades before its source can be located. The historical isolation ensures these sounds carry across the dense woods, detached from any living source. The most disturbing evidence manifests visually near the bluff overlooks. Apparitions take the form of frail, pale figures dressed in late 19th century attire, their translucent forms consumed by their fatal illness. They rarely interact, simply standing sentinel on the rocky precipices, perpetually gazing down toward the distant valley lights. The mountain swallowed the memory of their brief, desperate stay, leaving only the chilling echoes of their failed hope embedded into the landscape. That wraps up our chilling tour of Huntsville's top 15 haunted hotspots. From Maple Hill Cemetery to those shadowy corners of downtown, it's clear the Rocket City has some permanent, spectral residents. If we missed your favorite ghost, let us know in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe for more Alabama deep dives, and ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching. Sleep tight. If you can